Dumb justice witch. That's how President Donald Trump, the 47th Commander-in-Chief, spat across the chamber at Jasmine Crockett, the Congresswoman who has been called the last firewall of truth. In that single hearing, 327 cameras were rolling, 41 million Americans were watching live, and the entire world held its breath. It wasn't politics anymore. It was a knife fight with words, every slash carrying the weight of justice or corruption. And when the first insult cut through the silence, the battle for America's soul began. The room was still trembling from the echo when Trump leaned forward, shoulders squared like a prize fighter, eyes blazing with defiance. He hadn't even taken a sip of water. He hadn't even adjusted his tie. His voice thundered, "You're nothing but a political puppet, a stage prop for the weak, and everyone in this chamber knows it." Gasps rippled across the committee hall. A dozen journalists froze mid-keystroke. Cameras zoomed in, shutters snapping like automatic gunfire. Screens across the nation lit up as viewers leaned closer. Some grinning, some fuming, all electrified. The insult wasn't just a jab, it was a cannon blast. And Jasmine Crockett, calm, sharp-eyed, every line of her posture screaming resistance, didn't flinch. She rose half an inch from her seat, palm slamming down on the mahogany table. The sharp crack jolted the room like a gunshot. Her words sliced the air. "No, Mr. President, I am not a puppet. But you are the most dangerous liar ever to stain the Oval Office." The chamber erupted. Half the crowd roared approval, fists clenched in solidarity. The other half jeered, veins bulging, faces red with rage. Online, hashtags detonated across Twitter and Facebook within seconds. Our puppet or president, our tyranno Crockett v. Trump. Justice clash. Trump's lips curled into a smirk, but his knuckles whitened on the armrest of his chair. Jasmine's eyes locked on his, unwavering, burning like steel tempered in fire. This wasn't the polite choreography of Washington hearings. This wasn't scripted theater. This was combat. Every camera captured it. Every heartbeat in that chamber synced to the rhythm of war drums. A congresswoman from Texas against the sitting president of the United States. One armed with facts, the other with fury. One fighting for truth, the other for survival. Trump leaned back, laughing, a booming, guttural sound that bounced off the marble walls. But the laugh didn't soften the blow. It amplified the tension, like thunder rolling over a battlefield. "Look at her," he sneered, turning to the committee members. "The face of so-called justice. A desperate woman, screaming lies for attention. She's no warrior. She's a spectacle." The insult was designed to crush, to belittle, to reduce her to dust. But Jasmine only leaned forward. Her voice dropped lower, steadier, deadlier. History doesn't remember the loudest man in the room. It remembers the one who stood for the truth when the world tried to silence her. The words landed like stone against glass. Trump's jaw twitched. The cameras caught it. The audience at home felt it. The shift in gravity, the weight of defiance that could not be laughed off or shouted down. In that moment, the committee chamber no longer felt like a hall of politics. It felt like a coliseum. The crowd was divided, the stakes colossal, the air thick with the scent of blood in the water. And every second, more viewers tuned in, unable to look away, unwilling to miss even one word of this duel. This was not a hearing. This was a war. And Jasmine Crockett had just fired the first shot back. The battle lines were drawn. The insults had cracked the sky like lightning, and thunder rolled through every household watching. No one could unhear it. No one could forget it. Because this wasn't politics anymore. This was the fight for the nation's soul. And if you believe truth should never be silenced, if you believe justice deserves a voice even in the darkest rooms, subscribe to Harrison Stories, where battles like this are never buried, and where the story only begins here. The echo of Jasmine's defiance had barely faded when Trump leaned forward again. His grin widened, sharp as a blade. The kind of smile that wasn't joy, it was dominance. "Face it," he barked, his finger jabbing across the table. "You're not even in my league. You're not built for this fight. You're a small-time player trying to spar with a giant, and everyone knows it. The words detonated like a grenade. Not in my league. Too small. Everyone knows it. Each phrase was a lash, designed to cut deeper than policy, deeper than politics. This wasn't about the facts anymore. This was about humiliation. Trump leaned back, shoulders wide, his posture dripping with arrogance. He looked less like a president on trial and more like a king on his throne, surveying his court. And with every syllable, he fed the image he wanted America to see. Himself untouchable, unshakable, unbeatable. Gasps and murmurs swept the chamber. Some committee members glanced nervously at one another, as if wondering if Jasmine would crack under the weight of it. Others looked down at their notes, refusing to meet her eyes, unwilling to be caught in the blast radius of Trump's attack. Online, the insults spread like wildfire. Clips were clipped. Memes spawned within seconds. "Not in my league," trended before the sentence was even finished. And yet, Jasmine did not flinch. She sat still, jaw clenched, lips pressed tight. Her eyes, though, told a different story. They sparked, sharp and dangerous, like flint struck against steel. The insult had landed, but instead of breaking her, it was hardening her, forging her into something stronger. Trump saw it, and for a brief second, just a flicker, his smirk tightened, as though he realized his blow hadn't drawn blood the way he'd expected. But he pressed on, relentless. "You've got nothing, Congresswoman, nothing but a desperate hunger for attention. You're a footnote at best, a failed story trying to write herself into history. And you think you can stand across from me? You think you can measure up to Donald J. Trump?" The chamber boiled. It wasn't a debate anymore. It was a public stripping down, a theater of dominance, a calculated performance meant to reduce Jasmine Crockett to ashes in front of the entire nation. For the audience watching at home, it was uncomfortable. For some, it was thrilling. For others, it was enraging. But for everyone, it was impossible to turn away. Jasmine's knuckles pressed white against the table's edge. Her breathing slowed, not shallow, not panicked, measured, controlled, like a boxer taking the hit, waiting for the moment to strike back. And then, silence. The kind of silence that only happens when thousands of eyes, millions of screens, hold their breath all at once. The president's words hung heavy, staining the air. And in that silence, the camera caught Jasmine's eyes. Eyes that didn't waver. Eyes that didn't bow. Eyes that promised fire was coming. Trump, sensing the tension he had created, leaned back further, almost basking in it. He spread his arms across the chair like a conqueror who had already claimed his victory. The smirk returned. The arrogance grew. He wanted America to believe she was out of her depth. He wanted Jasmine Crockett to drown before she even began to swim. But what he didn't realize, what none of his supporters in that chamber realized, was that humiliation doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it ignites. And as Jasmine sat there, lips pressed, eyes blazing, the nation could see it too. This was not surrender. This was the moment before the storm. The question that gripped every viewer, every lawmaker, every heartbeat in that room was simple. How would she answer? Because one truth was now clear. This wasn't just Trump versus Jasmine. This was arrogance versus defiance, power versus justice. And the next words out of her mouth would decide which side drew first blood. Jasmine inhaled, slow and deep. Then she rose from her chair, not rushed, not flustered, deliberate. Her hand slid across the table, gathering the thick folder of papers she had prepared. When she lifted it, the fluorescent lights caught the seal of the House committee, bright, undeniable, official. The chamber hushed. Even Trump's smirk faltered, if only for a breath. Jasmine set the folder down with a heavy thud. The sound cracked through the silence like a gavel. Her voice followed, ringing sharp, steady, unshakable. "Mr. Trump, you call me small. You call me unworthy. But this," she tapped the folder once hard, "is bigger than both of us, and it has your name written all over it." The air snapped. Every camera in the room zoomed closer. The audience leaned forward, caught between dread and thrill. Jasmine flipped open the file. Her fingers moved with the precision of a surgeon, lifting a single document. She held it high so the cameras could capture every black line of ink. "Exhibit A," she declared. "Financial records. Signed, stamped, verified. Proof that campaign funds meant to serve the American people, were diverted into private accounts tied directly to your companies. Your signature sits right here." Gasps. Whispers turned into a low roar. Some jaws dropped. Others clenched. The committee chair shifted uneasily, suddenly aware that this was no longer theater. This was evidence. This was ammunition. Trump barked a laugh. It was loud, forced, brittle around the edges. "Fake. Totally fake. Another witch hunt paper. That doesn't prove anything." But his eyes darted. Just once. A flicker. The instinct of a man who recognized the trap before the audience did. Jasmine didn't blink. Her tone sharpened, each word like a nail hammered into wood. "This isn't Twitter, Mr. Trump. You can't yell fake and erase the truth. These documents come from the Treasury's own oversight division. Independent, irrefutable, and they show a pattern, your pattern, of deception." The chamber quaked. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens struggling to keep pace with the avalanche of revelations. Online, hashtags ignited like wildfire. Art, justice vs. power. Gax, Trump exposed. Chuck, Crockett strikes. Screens across the country lit up. In diners, in living rooms, in quiet late-night offices, Americans leaned closer, unable to turn away. The narrative was shifting. Trump wasn't untouchable anymore. For the first time, beads of sweat glimmered along his brow, tiny but visible under the harsh glow of the cameras. He straightened his tie, his fingers twitching against the polished wood of the table. Still, he forced out a grin. "Documents can say anything. This is nothing but a desperate stunt from a desperate woman." But the cadence of his words betrayed him. The once-iron certainty in his tone cracked, letting hesitation seep through. Jasmine stepped forward, her heels striking against the floor like war drums. "You call me desperate. No, I am determined. Determined to show the American people that justice is not a toy for the rich. Determined to prove that power doesn't mean impunity. Determined to remind you," her voice rose, cutting the air like lightning, "that no one, not even a president, stands above the law." The room erupted. Applause burst from one corner, then another, until it rolled like thunder across the chamber. Security guards shifted, unsure if order could even be restored. And Trump froze in the eye of the storm. He clenched his jaw, his knuckles pale against the chair's armrest. The swagger in his shoulders sagged, the bravado dimmed. For the first time in this hearing, he looked cornered. The tension tightened like a wire about to snap. Every second stretched long, heavy, unbearable. Would Trump strike back with fury? Would Jasmine press forward with more proof? The audience didn't know. But what they did know, what every viewer across America could feel, was that this wasn't entertainment anymore. This was war. Justice had loosed its first arrow, and it had hit its mark. Hook. Trump leaned in, forcing a smile that no longer reached his eyes. His voice cracked with forced bravado. "Nice trick, Congresswoman. But I'm still standing, and I don't fall that easy." The chamber held its breath, because the storm had only begun. Trump leaned forward, elbows on the table, a grin crawling back across his face. But this time it wasn't confidence. It was calculation. He didn't strike at the documents. He didn't deny the signatures. Instead, he went lower. "Look at her," he sneered, waving his hand toward Jasmine like she was nothing more than a prop. "She stands here pretending to be pure, pretending to be justice. But the truth? She's a fraud. Everyone knows she took money from radical groups, foreign interests. She's the corrupt one. She's the liar." The words shot like poison, deliberate, toxic, designed not to argue the facts but to pollute the air. Gasps scattered across the room. Reporters froze, pens hovering midair. Because this wasn't rebuttal. This was mud. Jasmine's jaw tightened, but she didn't speak yet. She knew his game. He wanted filth, distraction, confusion, and he wasn't done. Trump slammed his palm flat against the table. "You want to talk about documents? I've got documents too. Pages and pages of her ties to extremist movements, to activists who hate America. She's nothing but a puppet. Funded, bought, controlled. He lifted a stack of loose papers, waving them like holy scripture. But the cameras caught it. The pages weren't official. No seals, no signatures, no weight. Just flimsy printouts, half legible, designed only to look incriminating. Still, the damage was done. The crowd ignited. Some shouted, "Shame!" Others roared, "Lies!" The chamber erupted into a boiling sea of voices. The chairman's gavel slammed down again and again, wood cracking against wood. But the noise swallowed it whole. "Order! Order in this chamber!" But order was gone. Trump had dragged the battlefield into the mire, and everyone was sinking. Online, chaos mirrored the room. Fake headlines flashed across feeds, shared thousands of times within minutes. Crockett linked to extremist funding? Secret ties to radical groups? Clickbait thrived on confusion, and Trump had planted the seed. And through it all, he laughed, a loud, booming sound that filled the air like thunder. "You see, she can't answer. She can't deny it, because it's true." Jasmine's fists clenched under the table. She could feel the mud being thrown, the filth being spread. She knew the lies, but she also knew how fast they traveled, how quickly falsehoods could take root. The audience watching at home burned with fury. They saw the tactics, the smears, the shameless twisting of truth. But they couldn't look away. This wasn't just politics anymore. It was spectacle. Ugly, raw, magnetic. Trump leaned back, tossing the fake papers aside like confetti. The gesture was theater, pure performance, but it landed with weight. "He talks like a king," one viewer typed in disbelief on a livestream chat. "But his crown is made of lies," another replied. Inside the chamber, the shouting grew louder. Some lawmakers rose to their feet, gesturing wildly, caught between outrage and disbelief. Security hovered near the walls, uncertain if this was politics or riot. Jasmine finally stood. Her silence had lasted long enough. But before she spoke, she let the chamber simmer in its chaos. Every voice, every shout, every gavel strike feeding the tension higher and higher. Trump smirked at her. He believed he had won this round, that by dragging her into the mud, he had dirtied her white robes of justice forever. But what he failed to see, what only the sharpest eyes watching could sense, was that Jasmine was waiting, not silenced, not broken, waiting for the perfect strike, because mud might smear, but it could also reveal who was afraid to fight in the light. The storm roared on, and somewhere in the middle of that chaos, a battle line sharpened. One side wielding lies like weapons, the other sharpening truth into arrows. The question hung in the air like smoke. When Jasmine fired back, would the chamber survive the blast? And if you believe lies should never drown the truth, if you believe battles like this reveal the soul of a nation, subscribe to Harrison Stories, where justice is never silenced and where the fight is only just beginning. But in that chamber, silence had already been buried. What followed was collision. Jasmine leaned forward, eyes burning, voice sharp enough to slice through the roar. "Mr. Trump, your so-called evidence isn't worth the ink it's printed with. No signatures, no seals, no oversight, just blank paper dressed up to look dangerous. You're waving smoke and calling it fire." The words cracked through the air like lightning. Trump snapped back instantly, refusing to yield a second. "Wrong! Everyone knows you're connected to radicals. Everyone. And you're terrified I'm exposing you right now in front of the nation." "No!" Jasmine fired, her voice pounding against his like a drumbeat. "I'm not terrified. I'm disgusted. Disgusted that a man holding the highest office thinks he can replace truth with noise and expect America to bow." The clash was immediate. Words like blades, strikes, and parries. Trump thrust again. "You're nothing but a mouthpiece for the radical left. Bought and paid for." Jasmine raised her shield. "Deflection, classic. When the evidence cuts too close, you scramble for ghosts and shadows to distract the crowd." Trump's face flushed, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. "Don't lecture me. I built this country stronger than anyone before me. You've built nothing but division." Jasmine's retort came fast, like steel meeting steel. "You didn't build strength. You built fear. You didn't build unity. You built walls. And every lie you speak here proves you're terrified of accountability. The chamber vibrated with energy. Microphones shook as fists pounded against tables. Camera lights glared, catching every drop of sweat, every twitch of a jaw, every flicker in the eyes. Accountability, Trump scoffed, voice booming, his words meant to bulldoze. You don't even know the meaning of it. You hide behind committees, behind your fake moral armor, pretending you're some warrior of justice. But everyone sees it. You're weak. Too weak to face me head on. Jasmine slammed her palm down, the echo snapping spines straight in their seats. I am facing you head on, right now, and the entire country can see which one of us is actually trembling under the lights. Gasps shot across the chamber. The audience watching at home leaned forward, pulses pounding. Trump snarled, leaning into the microphone so hard it rattled. You think you're clever? You think you can twist this? I am the President of the United States. You are nothing but a loud voice in a cheap suit. The insult cracked the air, jagged and cruel, but Jasmine didn't blink. She smiled, sharp, dangerous. Loud voices, she said evenly, her tone cutting deeper for its calm, are the only thing tyrants fear. The words hung, electrified, vibrating in every ear, sword and shield, strike and block, neither yielding. The gavel banged again and again, but even the chairman's voice was swallowed by the duel. This was no longer testimony, it was battle. Each sentence, a slash. Each rebuttal, a block. The audience no longer breathed. It was too much, too fast, too fierce. Who would falter first? Who would be cut open by words sharper than knives? Cameras zoomed in tighter. Sweat dripped from brows caught in the light like sparks. Eyes locked, blazing, neither combatant looking away. Trump pounded his chest with his hand. I am power. I am the voice of America. Jasmine stepped closer, voice rising like thunder. No, you are the echo of corruption. And today, America hears the difference. The collision thundered. It was no longer about documents or distractions. It was about dominance. It was about survival. And as the crowd sat frozen in awe, one truth became clear. This duel of words was just beginning to bare its teeth. Hook. The question gripped every soul watching. Who would break first under the weight of this war of tongues? Trump made sure it wasn't him. He didn't wait for the chairman's gavel. He didn't wait for Jasmine's breath. He roared, corruption, fraud, treason. Each word a thunderclap crashing over the chamber. He leaned into the microphone, his voice amplified, booming, drowning everything else. You funneled money into radical protests. You colluded with foreign agents. You cheated your own voters while pretending to be their savior. Accusations hurled like stones, one after another, relentless. There was no pause, no chance for Jasmine to interject. Every time she opened her mouth, another wave of words slammed her shut. You're under investigation right now. People don't know it, but I know it. You're compromised. You're controlled. You're a disgrace. The chamber exploded into noise. Shouts from committee members clashed with gas from the gallery. The gavel pounded again and again, but it was a toy hammer against a hurricane. Reporters scrambled, fingers flying across keyboards, desperate to capture the torrent before it swallowed itself. Screens lit up across the country, television anchors interrupting broadcasts mid-sentence just to cut in live. The air itself seemed to quake, not with truth, but with volume. This wasn't strategy, it was chaos incarnate. Trump wasn't defending himself. He was overwhelming the battlefield with noise so thick it suffocated reason. And it worked. Some viewers at home, overwhelmed by the flood, couldn't tell what was fact and what was fabrication anymore. Every shout blurred into another, every claim stacked on top of the last until it became a wall of sound impossible to scale. He's winning by sheer force, one journalist whispered into a hot mic. He's drowning her out. Trump's face gleamed red, sweat streaking down his temples, but his eyes glowed with the fire of a man who thrived in madness. He banged the table with his fist, rattling the microphones. She's the liar. She's the traitor. She's the one who should be on trial. The crowd howled back, voices fractured, some booing, some cheering, all swept into the undertow. It was no longer debate. It was a riot of sound, a mob inside four walls. Jasmine sat rigid, her body still, her lips pressed tight. The storm battered her, tried to swallow her whole. Every instinct screamed to cut through it, to fight back, but she knew this was his trap. The more she tried to speak, the more he would shout. The more she tried to explain, the more he would bury her in words. Still, the pressure mounted. Her heartbeat thudded like a drum in her ears. Her papers trembled under her fingers. Online, chaos reached fever pitch. Conspiracy accounts clipped Trump's rants, flooding timelines with captions like, "Proof against Jasmine Crockett," "Trump exposes radical ties live," "Facts drowned," "Falsehoods flew." Millions watched, dizzy, their rage rising not from clarity, but from confusion. And Trump fed on it. He stretched his arms wide as if he were conducting an orchestra of chaos. "You see? Everyone sees it. She's scared to speak because she knows I'm right." His grin split wide, manic, his voice shredding at the edges from the sheer force of his tirade. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Volume was his weapon, and frenzy his shield. The chamber swayed under the weight of it. Lawmakers shouted over one another. The gavel cracked again and again, hollow and futile. Order was no longer possible. For those watching, it was mesmerizing in its horror. A spectacle of power unhinged, a man using madness as strategy. And yet, through the storm, one truth became clear. This chaos could not last forever. Jasmine knew it. She sat, motionless, letting the hurricane roar around her, waiting for the precise moment when the storm would begin to collapse under its own weight. Trump's voice cracked, his tirade slowing for just a fraction, enough for air to slip back into the room. And Jasmine seized it. She leaned forward, fingers steady on the microphone. Her voice cut through, low at first, then rising. Sharp, unwavering, deliberate. "You've built your wall of noise, Mr. Trump, but noise cannot bury truth." The chamber stilled, pulled toward her words like iron to a magnet. Reporters froze mid-type. The gavel lowered, forgotten. She reached for a folder she hadn't touched all day. Slim, unmarked, sealed until this very moment. The sound of the clasp snapping open rang louder than the echoes of Trump's last shout. "I was saving this," she said, her tone calm but laced with steel, "because I knew you'd try to hide behind chaos. But chaos has a limit, and facts always find the light." She lifted a document, crisp under the glare of the lights. Every camera in the room zoomed. Every screen across America flickered closer. "This," she declared, "is the record of payments made through your shell companies to silence witnesses. Not rumors, not speculation, direct transfers, signed and confirmed, hidden for years, until now." The words detonated. The chamber gasped like a single body punched in the gut. Trump froze, his mouth half open. The next insult lodged in his throat. For the first time all day, his eyes darted. Left, right, anywhere but the paper she held aloft. The silence of his hesitation was deafening, a silence more powerful than any shout. And then, an eruption. One voice from the gallery, loud, uncontainable. "He's finished! He's got no way out!" Others followed, shouts ricocheting off marble walls. "Checkmate! She nailed him! Justice finally hits back!" Trump slammed the table, sputtering, his face draining color and then flooding crimson again. "Fake! It's all fake! Manufactured! Fabricated! A setup from the start!" But his voice lacked its earlier thunder. It trembled, and the tremor was caught by every microphone. Jasmine didn't flinch. She placed the document flat before her, tapping it once with her finger, her eyes never leaving his. "You can yell at me, you can insult me, you can try to bury me in lies, but this is your handwriting, your signature, your stain." Gasps rolled again. The cameras caught everything. The flicker in Trump's eyes, the tightness of his jaw, the falter in his breath. The image broadcast instantly, a split second frozen into a symbol, the moment when power flinched. Across social media, hashtags ignited like wildfire. Trump cornered, Charge shock to justice vs. power. No way out clips of Jasmine's calm delivery circulated by the thousands. Captions screaming, "She waited and she struck." Trump's team shuffled nervously behind him, whispering, sliding papers, mouthing frantic instructions, but the damage was already done. The aura of untouchable dominance cracked, and everyone in the room saw it. Jasmine leaned back now, her composure unshaken, her voice steady as steel. "You've spent years convincing America that rage equals strength, but real strength is having proof when the shouting stops." The chamber thundered, not with Trump's voice this time, but with applause, cheers, the roar of a public seeing the tide turn before their very eyes. And for Trump, the nightmare was not the paper on the table. It was the silence he could not command. The silence that told the world he had been struck where it hurt most. Not in the ego, not in the volume, but in the armor of invincibility he had worn for decades. His lips moved, fumbling for another attack, another diversion. But the more he sputtered, the more the room saw weakness instead of strength. The more the cameras captured desperation instead of dominance. And Jasmine didn't push further. She didn't need to. The precision of her strike was enough. The war of words had tilted. The balance of the battlefield had shifted. Trump, once the master of chaos, now sat inside it, drowning in the very storm he unleashed. And the nation watched, breathless, knowing in that moment something had changed. But change has a way of cracking open the deepest fears. And for Donald Trump, fear never came dressed in silence. It came dressed in rage. He exploded. The wooden table shuddered as his fist slammed down, rattling glasses, scattering papers. The gavel struck frantically, but its rhythm was drowned in his voice. A voice unchained, blistering with fury. "You think you can touch me? You nobody! You cheap, pathetic little puppet!" His words ricocheted like bullets through the chamber. The insult wasn't aimed at arguments anymore. It was aimed at flesh, at bone, at the very being of Jasmine Crockett. He leaned across the microphone, red-faced, veins straining against his neck. "You are nothing! Nothing compared to me! You, a bubblegum politician, dare to stand in front of a president?" The camera lenses twitched, jerking closer, as if pulled by gravity toward the chaos. Producers in newsrooms barked orders. "Zoom in! Don't cut! Get every second of this!" Jasmine sat still, her knuckles white against the polished wood, but her eyes locked on him like steel on fire. She did not blink. She did not look away, and that only stoked the inferno. Trump's voice cracked into something primal, almost feral, spitting words so coarse the stenographer hesitated, hands trembling over the keys. "You're a fraud, a joke, a dirty little—" The rest tangled in obscenities, spilling from his mouth faster than breath. The microphones hissed with distortion, unable to contain the roar. The chamber erupted, gasps, shouts, murmurs colliding into a wall of noise. Even those loyal to him shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flickering to the cameras, aware of what millions were now witnessing. Because this was not the poise of a leader. This was not the command of a president. This was a man unraveling, Lev, in front of a nation that had given him its highest seat. His chair scraped back violently as he surged to his feet. He towered not with dignity, but with desperation, pounding the air with his finger, pointing at Jasmine as if stabbing invisible daggers into her chest. "You should be ashamed to even be breathing in this chamber with me. You're weak. You're small. You're—" He choked on his own fury, spittle spraying, his voice growing hoarse yet louder, each word vibrating off the marble walls. And the cameras kept rolling. Every shout, every stomp, every drop of sweat became a weapon against him. The reporters, their pens forgotten, now scribbled only single words. Unhinged. Meltdown. Collapse. On screens across the country, anchors whispered to producers, "This is history. This is a fall." The longer he raged, the smaller he seemed. The tighter he gripped the microphone, the clearer it became that control had slipped from his hands. Jasmine sat like a storm's eye, silent but unyielding. And in that silence, her power swelled, because every insult he hurled, every obscenity he spat, carved not at her, but at himself. One by one, the insults blurred into noise. One by one, the roars lost their edge, bleeding into the air like smoke fading from fire. And yet Trump kept shouting, as though his sheer volume could rewind time. Erase the document on the table, erase the crack in his armor, erase the silence that had already damned him. But silence, once heard, cannot be undone. The microphones trembled, the cameras closed in. The world saw not the titan he pretended to be, but the beast cornered, snarling, desperate for air. And in that moment, the scales of power shifted again. For the most powerful man in the world was no longer commanding the room. He was destroying himself within it. And in the ashes of his outburst, Jasmine Crockett rose. Not from her seat. No, she didn't need to move. Her power came not from motion, but from stillness, the kind that drew eyes like gravity. Where Trump's chaos had rattled the chamber, her calm began to smother it. She lowered her gaze to the folder before her, the same folder Trump had tried to shout out of existence. Her fingers moved slowly, deliberately, like a surgeon preparing for incision. Page 1. She lifted it, her voice low but cutting, every syllable polished with purpose. Transfer of funds, dated March 14th. Signed by the shell entity, routed through Delaware, ending in an account registered under the Trump Organization. The words dropped like stones into a well. No one moved. No one whispered. She turned the page. Invoice for consulting services. Amount $250,000. Recipient unnamed. Witness redacted for protection. Her tone was steady, almost clinical, but the effect was devastating. Each line she read was a hammer cracking away at the mask he had worn for years. The cameras drank in the image. Jasmine, unwavering, her voice resonating like church bells in a graveyard. Trump, frozen, his jaw locked, eyes darting, skin drained of its blustered red and pale as ash. She read again. Record of communication. Pressure applied to staff to destroy files. Handwritten note attached. In your script, Mr. Trump. Gasps. Shudders rippled through the chamber. The silence was not empty. It was heavy, suffocating, crushing down like a weight too great to bear. Trump's hands clenched on the table, his knuckles a stark, unnatural white. But he said nothing. For the first time, words abandoned him. Jasmine looked up now, meeting his eyes not with anger, but with something sharper. Pity. You've spent years telling the American people you're untouchable, she said softly. But paper doesn't lie. Ink doesn't lie. Signatures don't lie. Her voice never rose above calm. It didn't need to. The stillness was louder than thunder. Another page. Another blow. Wire transfer to overseas accounts, dated weeks before sworn testimony, claiming no such transfers occurred. Murmurs rose in the crowd. Some clutched their phones, already typing. Others just stared, unable to process the collapse unfolding in real time. She continued, relentless yet unhurried. Her voice was the steady tick of a clock, each second closer to the inevitable end. Line after line, lie after lie, peeled away until the figure before them was no longer the towering president, no longer the master of noise. He was just a man, cornered, his mask in pieces at his feet, and the silence held. Not even the gavel dared break it. Every lens zoomed closer, capturing the pallor of Trump's skin, the twitch of his lip, the sweat sliding down his temple. The beast that had raged only minutes before was gone. In its place was something smaller, weaker, something terrified. Jasmine's hand lowered the final page. Her voice softened, almost a whisper, yet it carried across every corner of the chamber. This is the truth you tried to bury beneath anger. But anger burns out. Truth remains. The words echoed in the marble hall, and in the living rooms of millions watching, hearts skipped, breaths caught, a collective realization dawning. They were watching history being turned, a page ripped from the book of denial and pressed into the record of justice. Trump tried one last time to speak, his lips parted, but the chamber's silence smothered him. Every sound he might have made collapsed into the air, too brittle to take shape. He sat back, shoulders slumping, eyes fixed on nothing. The cameras did not look away. The nation did not look away. Because in that moment, Donald Trump was not the 47th president of the United States. He was a man unmasked, his empire of words crumbling into dust before the steady, merciless rhythm of truth. And Jasmine Crockett, calm, unbroken, unafraid, was the one holding the mirror. The chamber seemed suspended between two heartbeats. Every cough, every shuffle, every rustle of paper had vanished. It was no longer a room full of witnesses. It was an arena with only two figures left standing. Trump lifted his head. The rage was gone now, burned out like a fire devouring its last scraps of oxygen. What lingered was something hollow, brittle, desperate. His eyes, once fiery, flickered under the fluorescent lights, darting from Jasmine to the papers before her, then back again, as if searching for an escape that no longer existed. Their eyes locked, steel against fear, unbroken calm against crumbling pride. The cameras zoomed tighter, the frame narrowing until nothing else mattered but this collision of gazes. Trump swallowed, his throat working audibly in the silence. Then, with a voice stripped of thunder, stripped even of venom, he muttered the only defense left to him. All of this, his words dragged, heavy, ragged. All of this is a joke, a sham, a circus for the cameras. Nothing more. It was less a statement than a plea, a final attempt to shrink the gravity of what had just unfolded. A desperate hope that if he dismissed it, maybe the nation would too. But Jasmine did not blink. She leaned into her microphone, her tone measured, crystalline, sharp as the blade of a guillotine. "The truth," she said, "is never a joke." The words split the silence like lightning splitting the night. The chamber trembled, not with noise, but with the weight of the moment. Her reply was not long, not adorned, not fiery. It was final. It was the sound of a door slamming shut, of history deciding where it would stand. Trump's face faltered. His lips parted as if to fire back, but no words came. What answer could undo what had been laid bare? What insult could erase signatures inked in his own hand? None. And so, for the first time in memory, Donald Trump sat silent. The cameras caught it all: the trembling jaw, the hollow stare, the weight of defeat pressing down on his shoulders. That silence, that small collapse of a man who had built his empire on noise, became the loudest sound of the day. Jasmine didn't gloat. She didn't smile. Her strength was not in victory dances, but in the steadiness of conviction. She simply gathered her papers, stacked them neatly, and folded her hands over them, as if to say, "The evidence now speaks for itself." The spectators felt it. They weren't just watching a hearing. They were watching a curtain fall, a mask shatter, a chapter of history close before their eyes. Phones buzzed across the country. Headlines already flashed. Trump silenced. Crockett delivers final blow. The end of untouchable power. And in living rooms and offices and bars across America, people leaned closer to their screens, knowing they had witnessed something rare. The precise moment when justice did not just speak, it struck. Trump leaned back at last, collapsing into his chair as though it alone held him upright. He muttered something inaudible, eyes down, no longer daring to look at the woman across from him. But Jasmine's gaze remained steady, her words still hanging in the air like smoke that refused to clear. The truth is never a joke. Those 7 words were the sword that cut through years of noise, arrogance, and intimidation. And they hung suspended, etched into the marble of the chamber, etched into the memory of a nation. The hearing had begun with thunder, with insult, with rage. It ended with silence. The silence of a man defeated not by volume, but by truth. And the silence of a chamber that knew, though no one dared to say it aloud, that history had just turned a page. Because justice had looked power in the eye, and power blinked. The gavel cracked through the chamber, once, twice, 3 times. The chair's voice strained above the roaring echoes of gasps, whispers, and the frenzied clicking of cameras. "Order! Order in this room!" But the word itself had lost its meaning. Order was gone. The chamber had fractured into something else, a battlefield of perception, a spectacle no hammer could tame. Trump sat slumped, his hands gripping the edge of the table, knuckles pale, as though he might steady himself against the tide of history closing in. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett did not flinch. Her chin was lifted, her papers aligned, her composure untouched. The cameras knew where to look. One frame captured it all. Trump, head lowered in a moment of defeat. Jasmine steady, unbroken, the embodiment of defiance. It was the image that would ricochet across the globe. Within seconds, headlines flashed. Breaking. Trump stunned in hearing clash. Crockett holds the line. Power meets its reckoning. On cable news, anchors scrambled to narrate what their audiences had just witnessed. On social media, hashtags erupted like wildfires. New York, Trump meltdown. Justice, VOA's power. Crockett cuts deep. Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, all became extensions of the chamber itself, millions of spectators replaying the moment in slow motion. The muttered, "This is a joke." The calm reply, "The truth is never a joke." The silence that followed. In living rooms and office break rooms, in subway cars and crowded bars, the debate surged. Some roared in triumph. "They finally got him! Did you see his face? That's the look of a man beaten." Others hissed back, "No, this was staged. A witch hunt, nothing more. He's still our fighter." The nation split itself once more, a fracture widening in real time, and yet something about this moment felt different. Not just noise, not just politics. Something had shifted. For the world was watching too. From London to Tokyo, from Berlin to Sydney, international outlets ran the same photograph. Trump's bowed head, Jasmine's steady stare, and headlines abroad cut sharper than those at home. America's strong man cornered. The end of untouchable power? Crockett versus Trump, a moment of reckoning. In embassies, in parliaments, in presidential palaces, leaders studied the scene. Some smirked, others frowned, all understood. The United States had just bared its fault line for the world to see. Inside the chamber, the gavel struck again. Order! But the crowd, spectators, aides, journalists, was no longer listening. The hearing was over, but its echo had already spilled beyond those walls. Trump finally lifted his head. The cameras zoomed close, hungry for every flicker of expression. His jaw was clenched, his nostrils flared. But the authority once carried in his presence had cracked. He looked less like a conqueror and more like a man struggling to hold together the last pieces of his armor. Jasmine, meanwhile, remained composed. No celebration, no visible triumph. Her restraint was its own statement. Victory did not need noise. It lived in silence, in truth that spoke louder than fury. The symbolism was impossible to miss. One man, red-faced, rattled, retreating. One woman, steady, unyielding, anchored in conviction. The battle lines had been drawn in words, but the judgment was playing out in images. And images, once unleashed, could not be recalled. Across America, citizens argued, cheered, cursed, wept. Across the world, observers whispered of empire and downfall. And in that single hour, one question spread faster than any verdict, any ruling, any law. Was this the collapse of a dynasty? The moment when an empire built on bravado and noise cracked beneath the weight of its own hubris? The gavel struck one last time. This hearing is adjourned. But everyone in that chamber knew the hearing was only the beginning. The true judgment was not in the room. It was out there, in the homes, the streets, the feeds, the nations now replaying every word, every glance, every silence. And in that judgment, two figures remained etched in the spotlight. Donald Trump, head bowed, armor shattered. Jasmine Crockett, chin lifted, truth in her hands. A clash of power and justice, a spectacle of downfall and defiance. And as the world weighed what it had just seen, one question thundered louder than all the rest. Had they just witnessed the fall of an empire? Outside the Capitol, the air vibrated with noise. Crowds had swelled into the avenues, their chants rising like the rumble of thunder rolling through stone. On one side, Trump loyalists, fists in the air, their voices breaking with rage and fear. They waved banners, shouted his name, swore that what had happened inside was treason wrapped in theatrics. They can't silence him. He's our warrior. On the other side, those who had longed for this day, their chants sharper, fiercer, carried by a current of vindication. They raised placards scrawled with words like "Truth wins" and "Justice speaks." Their voices clashed in the streets, a storm of slogans and accusations. Bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, separated only by barricades and lines of weary police. Helicopters circled overhead. Camera crews scrambled through the chaos, shoving microphones into the faces of protesters. Each quote, another flashpoint to beam across the world. The headlines had already crowned it. The showdown of the century. Justice versus power. Who will America choose? The clash heard round the world. And through that roar, the doors of the Capitol opened. The crowd hushed in waves like a tide pulling back. From the shadow of the great building, she appeared, Jasmine Crockett. The floodlights from cameras swung to her in unison, blinding brilliance washing across her face. And there she stood, shoulders squared, eyes forward, the embodiment of calm after chaos. For a moment the chance faltered. Even her enemies stared, because she looked untouched, not triumphant in arrogance, but resolute in conviction. A woman who had walked through the furnace and stepped out unburned. A reporter shouted first, "Congresswoman Crockett, is this the end for Donald Trump?" Jasmine paused on the top step, her papers still in hand. She did not answer at once, and in that silence the world leaned in, waiting. The wind tugged at her hair, flags snapped in the distance, and the crowd pulsed with expectation. Then her voice cut through it all. "This is not the end," she said, firm, steady, each word a pillar. "This is the beginning. The fight for truth, for justice, for the soul of this country has only just begun." The crowd erupted, one half with cheers, the other with jeers. But neither side could deny the gravity of what she had just declared, because in those words lay a promise, a vow that today was only the first battle in a war that would not be confined to marble halls or televised hearings. It would spill into every corner of the nation, into living rooms and classrooms, into boardrooms and ballot boxes, into the very fabric of America's future. Trump, still inside, had not emerged. His motorcade idled in shadow, guarded, silent, and the cameras outside did not wait for him. They were fixed now on Jasmine, the woman who had turned the tide. International anchors spoke in urgent tones. History unfolding before our eyes. A new symbol of resistance. America at a crossroads. The night deepened, but the noise did not fade. Protesters clashed in chants. Flares lit up the avenues. Phones stayed raised, capturing, streaming, immortalizing. And through it all, Jasmine descended the steps slowly, deliberately. Each footfall was echoed by the click of cameras, each frame already destined to live forever in archives and headlines. At the base of the steps, surrounded by aides and flashing bulbs, she stopped once more. The crowd hushed again, sensing the weight of what was coming. She raised her eyes to the horizon, not to the chaos before her, but to something beyond, and her voice, though quieter now, carried far. The battle for justice doesn't end in this chamber. It belongs to the people. And make no mistake, this war has only begun. The words rippled outward, igniting cheers, sparking rage, seeding headlines for the next dawn. And in that moment it became clear. This was no conclusion. This was ignition. The world had just witnessed a collision of truth and power, but the aftershocks were only starting to roll. And as the lights burned on, as chants shook the streets, as history scribbled furiously to keep up, one truth towered above the noise. The fight was far from over. In the end, what echoed louder than insults or fury was a reminder that truth, though fragile, is never powerless. Justice does not roar because it seeks attention. It roars because silence would mean surrender. This battle showed us that dignity in the face of cruelty and courage in the face of deceit are not signs of weakness, but of strength. And if we carry that lesson into our own lives, choosing honesty over convenience, compassion over fear, then the story we write tomorrow may finally be one worthy of us all. If this clash left you shaken, don't turn away. Sit with it. Share it. Let it spark the conversations too many try to bury. Like, comment, and send it to someone who still believes justice must speak louder than power. Subscribe to Harrison Stories, where no mask goes unchallenged and no lie stands unopposed. Hit the bell, because the battles ahead won't be gentle. They'll be fierce, and they might just change the way you see justice. This story is a fictional dramatization born from real wounds and real resilience. Any likeness to public figures is intentional, crafted for reflection, critique, and courage. Thank you for watching. Justice doesn't wait for permission, it's fought for. This is Harrison Stories.